So knowing your impact across the school, it's John Hattie's mantra, isn't it? Know thy impact. And what we're sorry, John, for trying to do your Australian accent there. But for me, what's really important is as we think about this and in our schools, what the digital processes and the digital tools that we're using inside our classrooms, are they actually making a difference? And for me, I had a real eye-opening experience with one of my classes during lockdown. I thought things were going really well with them, the interaction, a lot of the work that it was leaving, really high quality resources, and what I thought was high quality learning and teaching. But the problem was the interaction with that. There was maybe um, I don't know, a third of the class that were actually really interacting with the material. So the impact was really quite low. If I'm thinking about all the learners that should have been engaging with what it was that I was doing with that particular class. Um, so I look at here, it's almost a guttural word, but that idea, the centrifugal approach. So for me, the impact that we have, how does it impact the pupil? And we'll have a pupil-centric approach first at Harris, and then thinking about from the pupil, then moving out to the teacher, the whole school, and then the stakeholders complete. So impact is really, really important when we think about, for us in Scottish schools, what it is for us benchmarking how good what we do inside the classroom is. This is really important for how we measure our impact. So you look at Higgios 4, how good is our school? And it highlights two big things that needs measured. So if we're thinking about impact, well, how are we going to measure that impact? Well, we need to measure how we are improving the educational outcomes for all children and young people, and we need to measure the key work, which is just that quality of learning and teaching, which should be a focus. And I think it's fair to say that in any education establishment, the thing that you should be measuring is that quality of learning and teaching and the educational outcomes for all our learners. So how do we know that the things we're doing in this new normal are having a positive impact on our learners and on the quality of learning and teaching in our schools and in our colleges and in our universities? So key considerations on things for me that I felt on our journey at Harris that have made an impact. So I'm just going to share some practice for that. As we think about measurement, evidence is key. And for me, I think about that triangulation of evidence. I know that we talk about qualitative and quantitative, but for me it's a triangulation of, and it's built up of those two words, qualitative and quantitative. But we think about our conversations. Is our evidence much cop? Is it any good? So we think about our conversations, and we think about our observational evidence as we look around us and what's happening in our current situation. But then we think about the product, that quantitative evidence as well, because it's very objective in how we measure it. So when we think about the pupil or the learner, accessibility, and this is something that we can measure. How do we do that as a school? But can the learner access what you need them to access, and do you know whether they're actually accessing it or not? One of the things that we've put together are little videos for using digital platforms. So we'll have here just a little video. I don't know whether the audio doesn't necessarily need to play, so if it doesn't, don't worry too much. But we've created a little Harris at Home video for the use of our portal, so that pupils, whenever they click on the link, what they'll see is just maybe what's coming on their screen right now, which is a little self-help video to help them access their work from home. So are we doing
on a web browser?
So
type in Glow login.
How to log into different pieces of
the
software.
top address that arrives in the Google browser should be
because that's
your
really
Glow
not just saying it
sign in page.
But saying it time and time again, and then storing it and putting it.
Clicking on that link will bring you
how to use these things as well. I think that's really important. But what about resilience? How do we best practice this in our new normal? I told the story of that particular class where I thought that everything was going rosy and everything was fantastic with the online learning and teaching, and then realised that the impact was very low when I looked at the products that were coming back, that work, the learning that was coming back, and the engagement. But resilience is important, really important, to try and up that, to try and get more pupils doing what they need to be doing online. So are you practicing with them in their classrooms? Are we teaching in a way that facilitates our learners' self-regulation? So are we causing them to inquire and to lead their own learning? And for me, that was something that, again, as I measured, I found that it wasn't there. So moving forward, I think that we really need to embed into our practice a way to make our learners more resilient. So the pupil-centric approach, thinking about the pupil, are we and have we got processes in place that allow for accessibility with our digital platforms, and are we teaching our pupils to be more resilient and to lead their own learning? Because that's important as well. When we think about teachers and staff, really important. A couple of things here: clarity, and the clarity of what you're actually doing as far as digital learning in school. At Harris, one of the have is just basically a crib sheet that looks a little bit like this, and it highlights as a PDF the expectation of all regarding home learning and what that means, and then the different processes that we're using for digital learning, and how we should be using those as staff, sorry, and basically what those different programs are. So it's pretty straightforward, but again, it just means that staff are on the same page as far as clarity, and they know where it is that they're going. I think that might seem very straightforward. You're kind of thinking, well, sure, everybody should be aware of that. I'm just reminded of that old story where it's when somebody turns around and says, could you go into the bank for me? And immediately, if you're hearing that story, you think into the bank, you start to picture somebody walking in and going into the cash register and maybe doing a transaction in the bank. But what the person's actually saying is the water up ahead in the river is quite rough and choppy. For your own safety, you need to take your boat into the bank. And all of a sudden you're a bit like, oh, two very different things. And I think in school, it's really, really important when we think about clarity, because often the person that's given the instruction or taking the lead whenever they're explaining something, if that clarity is lost, then you get a wee tiny bit annoyed because what you're trying to action isn't being actioned, and then the other person on the other end, they think that they're doing what's expected of them, but because the clarity isn't there, they start to get annoyed as well. So it's great to just to stamp that out and think, are we being as clear as possible? When we think about development CLPL, how are we doing that with staff? There is lots of great stuff out there as far as CLPL and our new normal. If anything, the idea of webinars and different pieces of software coming from, and this is a little website that I have, just to try and pinpoint staff too, but you have from the GTCS, Education Scotland, the Education Endowment Foundation, Future Learn, Seneca. There's been lots of great stuff that's been happening by individuals. The PL Gathering was absolutely fantastic. Robin McPherson and Mark Healy, what they coordinated during lockdown. There's great stuff out there. And as I say, it's at the fingertips of staff, because it's all available, most of it free, online. Thinking as well about some of the group practice happening inside our schools. Are we sharing that? Are we looking at stuff that's research is telling us it's good, staff are really using it with kids and finding it's making an impact, and then are we sharing that with others so that they know? So one of the things that we do at Harris is try to highlight that good practice again. So using teachers to talk about how they've been streaming live lessons, virtual classrooms, Microsoft Teams. So a lot of this is, here's some of the good practice that's happening within school. How are you using it? What impact is it having? And how do you go about doing this in your classroom so that other staff can learn from it, which is vitally important. When we think about engagement as well for a teacher, I think that's really important. So how do you know when we're thinking about the impact that we're having? We need to know as individual teachers, not just from a whole school perspective, about how our pupils are engaging and how as the first protocol we can help them to engage better. So Microsoft Teams is brilliant. It has insights on it where we can see how pupils are interacting with our work, or with their work, sorry. And then how we as teachers are then feeding into the bigger picture so that other staff in different curricular areas are aware of how that pupil might be working in your particular area, as to are there any barriers in their area that you could help them with and overcome. Moving then to the whole school and what the whole school picture is. For me, coherence is big. When you're talking about, specifically in my position in a secondary school, when you've got 18 or 19 curricular areas that might be using different pieces of software. How do you make that accessible to the pupil? Especially when it's things that we're not using all the time. So one of the things that we've built at Harris is our Harris at Home portal. And for me, just to talk you through quickly what that is, it's built on Google Sites, but it's basically just, and I call it a portal because it's a gateway, which brings you to the different things that different curricular departments might be using. So just along the top, you can home English, maths, arts, sciences, social subjects, and what happens here is if a pupil logs onto our school website or if they log on to Glow, they can access this, and straight away when you click into English, what you'll find is it'll take you through to a page with English that gives them their English teachers, and English have been working hard and have their own learning zone. So what that means is that the English department have the autonomy to set work and put work up from each of their teachers. But if I was a pupil and I logged on here, I would see all my teachers. I would think, who is my teacher? Maybe my teacher's Mrs. Lowe, and if I click on Mrs. Lowe's name, it brings me through to their little portal in English, and I can see here am I an S1 pupil, an S3 pupil, National 5 or a higher pupil. If I click on National 5 or higher, it'll take me through to Microsoft Teams, and if I'm an S1 pupil, I'll click on S1 and it'll bring me through to a meaningful piece of work that I can be getting on with as an S1 pupil, and that just pops up straight away, and you can have a little look at that and work straight from the browser, or you can download it and you can print it as well. So that's something that's meaningful for each pupil. But what it does is, and what it allows us to do, is use this as a gateway. So if different departments are maybe using something slightly different, so if I was to go back to the portal again, and then maybe go to physics, might be using Glow, and they might be storing things in SharePoint. So again, if I go to physics, I can see here if I'm a higher physics pupil and I click on higher physics, this wouldn't take me through to a learning zone. It would take me through to where higher physics work is stored, which is a SharePoint on Glow. So again, it's just bringing all that together so that the pupils know, well, here's somewhere where I can go, but this is kind of my gateway to all of the other things that I need. And as I say, for those in our senior phase that are using Microsoft Teams, it takes them straight there as well. The good thing I like about using Google Sites is it, for me, is very, when we think about accessibility, it's something that if you're using it on a mobile browser or a tablet, or if you were accessing it via a console, or you're accessing it via an interactive TV, what you'll find is that it works quite well on all of those different platforms. Some of the things that we try and link it to, again, the accessibility will vary depending again on how it's built, but at least for this as a first port of call, what you'll find is as people start to interact with this, if they are using their phone, they can navigate it with ease. We've also done things like embedding some of our Twitter accounts there from the different departments as well. So it's just dead easy. If a pupil brings it up, then they've got that right in front of them. And that coherency for me is really, really important across a school. It's hard for me as somebody that's trying to navigate through all of this and make this accessible to pupils to think about where everything is stored. So for a pupil, it's almost nigh on impossible. So we need to do something to make it coherent for our pupils. And there's a variety of ways of doing that. And one of the big things as a school is checking for engagement as well. We use Show My Homework to do that, so all of our communication home goes through Show My Homework, and we use it in slightly different ways depending again on, as I was saying earlier, whether it's digital learning, so what we would classify as just using it for homework, or whether it's blended learning, or whether it's remote learning. Show My Homework will be used in a slightly different way, but it's still that piece of software that's being used. And the beauty of it is it gives an overview, especially to our pastoral staff, to be able to have a look and see how pupils are engaging across the whole school. Our final wee piece here then is on our stakeholders. So a lovely picture of the family here from George Lucas, but and his beautiful family. But thinking about how we engage with parents, how we engage with carers, and how we engage with the wider community. And again, communication is vitally important, and we use Twitter, we use our website, we use Show My Homework for that. But again, saying it and saying it again and saying it in different ways, but getting the consistent message out is important. We're thinking about parental engagement as well. We're thinking about how parents can help our learners with their learning. We've got digital support, so I'll click on this and it'll show you hopefully a little PDF that was put together. Now, this works really well on a mobile phone or a tablet, but basically it's created through Google Slides, and all of the images and all of the text boxes that come up are basically hyperlinks. So if you scroll over it, at the start you'll see making the most of this document just down in the bottom left hand corner, and if you were to click making the most of this document, what happens is it just opens a video on YouTube, which is an explanation of how you would use this particular document. And I'll put my volume up here.
This document is here to support you as a pupil, a parent, or a carer as you try to access and navigate the digital platforms that we are using at Harris for remote or home learning. The three major platforms that we are using are Glow, Show My Homework, and Microsoft Teams. If you log in using it,
So
you
that
have
basically
access to
in
many
one
groups
of
and many
the
different
text boxes
platforms in your
something
learning
slightly
journey.
different, but it's just help parents understand what's going on with our digital platforms, which again can be quite difficult to navigate. And as I click on stuff Microsoft Teams, it'll tell you what Microsoft Teams is, and then it'll show you around about it, how to access it, and basic using Microsoft Teams, what that looks like, some stuff for mobile phones as well. But just anything that you can do that's kind of supporting how parents work with their young people at home, because if learning is blended or learning is remote, that's really important. That the parents are involved and are coming along as part of this journey as well. But even for homework, that there's clarity there too. And that's pretty much it. We're going to move on to digital tools, and think about some more